Hello, David. Welcome to the Sacred Surf Shack podcast. Been absolutely super excited to have you on here. I'm so happy it finally lined up. I asked you quite a while ago, and then I didn't actually take any action to invite anyone on. And then all of a sudden, yeah, just guests coming on, and it's been absolutely great. And you're definitely someone I've been super excited to interview and bring on this podcast. You're a man that I have a deep resonance with in your work. I can feel that you've done a depth of inner exploration, and there's a purity there that you don't often see or feel on the Instagram sort of social circus. So, if you could just maybe just share a little bit about yourself, um, how you've landed, at the creation of the Art of Attunement, I guess.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me on, mate. Appreciate it. So I guess my journey started in the year 2000 when I met my teacher, Mark Rasmus. Worked out pretty quickly that he had something special. And I spent the following 10 years very closely with him. In the year pretty soon after I met him, he had some land up in Binnabar, up in the mountains in southeast Queensland, Australia, for those international people. And I built a cabin out in the forest there and spent the following 6 years pretty deep in practice. Didn't have a toilet, no shower, no running water. It was just a box in the middle of the forest. So that was a very amazing experience. Yeah, it was a very special time back then. I was pretty focused on practice and didn't really care about much else at the time. So yeah, it was a wonderful experience, and I quite often find myself fantasizing about it, even though it was very difficult as well. There was a lot of very lonely nights up there in the middle of the forest, in the middle of nowhere. But having said that, I probably had some of my greatest experiences out there. And yeah, that was a very wonderful time. From there, I was going to be a monk, went to Thailand, shaved off my eyebrows, and was going to be a monk for the rest of my life. That was my plan. It didn't work out that way as much. The temple was great. I was in northeastern Thailand in a temple called Wat Pa Nanachat. It's like an international Buddhist, Thai Buddhist tradition. It's a very serious, very hard work. You would the bell would go off at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you'd get up and meditate for a few hours, and then go and walk sort of 10 Ks barefoot to the village, and the villagers would be on the side of the road offering food, which was pretty amazing to see, because these people would come out of these small, tiny boxes with nothing and be sort of kneeling on the side of the street at 5 o'clock in the morning and to offer us food with these big smiles. And that was a pretty humbling experience to see that, they had so much veneration for that system and so much devotion to that energy. It was pretty incredible to see. So I spent about 3 or 4 months there. Had some personal issues that I had to take care of back in Australia. So I ended up coming back home, and I went to a few temples in the same tradition in Sydney. Stayed there for a little while. There was a beautiful temple. It's sort of on the edge of Canberra and Melbourne, actually, and beautiful Thai temple with all these really majestic caves, and I lived in even a smaller cabin. It was very, very small. It was about 1.5 meters by 1 meter wide under this big rock cliff, and lived there with my dog for quite some time. And that was an interesting experience. And yeah, so it was my 20s. I was pretty far deep down the rabbit hole. Yeah, that was a pretty serious phase of practice in my life. My 30s, I met my wife, my early 30s, had a couple of kids. So my 30s was very focused around family and building a stability for the family, I guess, in that respect. So a little bit less focused on practice during my 30s. And then I've hit my 40s. It's all coming back with full force, and it never leaves my mind. I've had too many kind of, once that door has been opened, it's kind of hard to close it. So that's where I'm at the moment. I really enjoy teaching. That's all I really want to do. I get so much satisfaction out of it. Although I'm still learning myself as well. It's a constant process, but I feel like I got given so much from my teacher that I find it feel a little bit guilty not to pass that on, so to speak, because I realize how much it changed my life and changed who I am. That it's to not pass that on is kind of a disservice. So that's kind of me.
Thank you for sharing. Just being so open and honest about your journey, and yeah, wow, such a rich experience. It's not often you hear someone of your age that has been through that much from their 20s and on. Well, I haven't come across that personally. My life was a bit different, but it's beautiful to hear that you're still holding on to that with such reverence and depth. That even though you went through and became married, I'm assuming you became married, and had kids, that it's still so cemented in your body and your nervous system and your mind.
Yeah.
So just for the viewers know, like I found David through Instagram, and the way the Instagram works is it kind of reads your mind, I guess. So I had happened to find David's teacher through YouTube by accident, and I fell in love with his work as well. And that was start of last year or end of 2019, I think. No, 2020. So pretty much 2021 I found him, and just like you said, he has something about him that you don't quite often find. And then you appeared and started to create dialogue with yourself, and I can just feel there's something in you that not many people hold within them in a very embodied way. I just want to, I guess the question I want to ask you is, spending 6 years spending that much time in your 20s, I guess that belief of hard times create strong, healthy men. If you have the means to see it as such. And I'm just wondering if you could share some of the deeper sort of lessons or learnings from, living out in the bush with no shitter and shower and stuff. That's incredibly hard. And I'm sure the viewers can gain some insight from.
Yeah, look, I think going through those experiences, it does build a lot of spirit. You look at people in third world countries, they're generally, most of the time, their spirit is very strong because they go through so much difficulty in their life. And sometimes in the first class world, we're surrounded by comfort. And not to say comfort's a bad thing. I don't personally believe that you have to endure hardship as such, but you have to. It does take a pretty determined willpower to really gain some substance with this work. I think with the advent of social media and those kinds of things, meditation is very misunderstood. And I think, and I'm not saying that I'm an expert by any means, I've still got learning to do. But for me, from looking from the outside in, I think 99% of us don't even know what meditation is. And it's it's very surface level stuff that most of us are dealing with. And to really access those deeper states of concentration takes a pretty determined willpower. You have to be pretty all in almost. It's I think with meditation, it's like with anything in life. If you want to get really good at it, you kind of got to be all in. And with meditation specifically, to be all in, you kind of got to let go of everything else, and that means the comforts and all those things. If they're there, then that's great, but it's like that old saying, it's not money that's not evil, it's the love of money. So it's our attachment to the things that are around us, and how can you go without that thing? Can you go without the comfortable bed? Can you go without the security, those sort of things, and trust in the infinite, or whatever you want to call it, and have that deep level of belief and embodiment where you can really embody that devotion to the work. And it's an experiential thing. I think with suffering comes a lot of growth. And yeah,
I agree with you there. Suffering does create a lot of growth. And there's a quote I read in the book "I Am That" by Nizikatata. Still not a quote, but one of his passages is that the threshold of liberation is detachment and dispassion. And it's like what you're saying, like you would have been in that sort of state in that time. I want to come back to what you're saying about how meditation is misunderstood. I definitely, for my own journey, I started meditating, believe it or not, or started right before going into prison. And then when I was in prison, that was when I started to actually get a bit more consistent meditating every day. And it was a pretty weird sort of circumstance to begin 7 years ago, 8 years ago. And even still, like it took me a long time to even, I was like, what the fuck is meditation? You know, it's all different. I was practicing intuitively different styles. And then it wasn't until I found Mark's work where it actually started to put it into like a more of a, I wouldn't say, well, I guess Hermeticism is kind of in a way scientific. It's like it put it into like boxes in the sense of, oh my God, I was practicing concentration there. Oh, I was practicing visualization there when I was closing my eyes. And then I started to understand that I was intuitively practicing these different kinds of meditation. But what really, and even still now, like I practice it, is so challenging is it the vital breathing that he talks about?
mm-hmm.
That particular meditation is incredible. It needs an incredible amount of willpower and concentration. Could you speak into that or meditation?
Yeah. So vital breathing it's something that we're doing constantly, naturally, every day. It's not something that you have to try and do. It's something that you have to become familiar with. Our skin is an epidermis. It has two functions. It acts as a second set of lungs, and it also secretes toxins. So when you're tuning into vital breathing, and this, it does take some effort, but it doesn't have to be too difficult. It's a matter of the key factors are to be able to slow down the breath. So if you look at a lot of the breathwork systems that are out there at the moment, they're very physical. Most of them are very based in physicality, which is not so much something that I've ever really investigated. Although, having said that, I think I did a lot of that heavier physical breath work in my weight training in the past, and I think that came natural, and I could see the benefits from that. Whenever you build weights, the breath is what gives you power, and being able to really hone the breath and wrap the breath around the spine when you're doing a big heavy squat or something. That's really what gives you the power. It's not so much in the muscle, it's the breath that gives you the power. But the vital breathing is just one step above the physical. So it's the first layer to break through. And it's a very quick way to break out of the physicality of the material body. And to do this, it's really just a matter of softening the breath. You need to soften the breath until the breath almost becomes imperceptible. So when you normally breathe, you can feel the air coming in out of the nose. When you vital breathe, it's very soft, and although it's happening naturally without our knowledge anyway. So you just need to switch from the idea of breathing air to breathing energy. It's a different feeling. So it's not so much that we're breathing oxygen through the skin, although there is a certain percentage, a very, very small percentage of oxygen that does enter the body through the skin. It's not that we're breathing the air through the skin, we're breathing energy through the skin. And that's happening naturally with or without our knowledge. Same as a heartbeat, the same as we naturally breathe. It's happening constantly with or without our knowledge. On the in-breath, energy comes into the whole body. On the out-breath, energy goes out of the whole body. So it's just a matter of becoming familiar with that process to begin with. So you don't want to imply any willpower to the process to begin with. You just investigate it. You become familiar with it. You learn it, you understand it, and you get a deeper sense of connection with it. And then once you get the connection with it, then you can begin to apply the willpower to increase the amount of energy that comes in on the in-breath and increase the amount of energy that goes out on the out-breath. Or you start to accumulate vital energy and build energy into the body. This is really the first level. There's other levels beyond this. So you move into what they call the astral body or the soul, or the astral world. We breathe on that world as well, on that level. And on the mental, same thing, but it's a different level of vibration. And there's some parameters that you can gauge where you're at, as to go, okay, I'm in the vital energy now, or I'm moving up into the astral, I'm moving up into the mental. So that's really the way it's broken down. And you can breathe. The breath is it's what gives us life. We can last a pretty long time without food. We can last a fair bit of time without water. We can't last very long without the breath. And the breath is hugely powerful. And there's a massive gift within inside of the breath that allows you to really it takes a little while to understand. It took me a long time to get, to be honest. I missed a lot of cues along the way, and I was like, oh, I missed that. And then over time, I realized, and it clicked, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's it. And it just takes a little. I was very lucky. I had a very good teacher, obviously. And I still missed the cues. But yeah, there's a huge gift within inside of the breath. But it's a matter of really investigating and breaking out of the physicality of the breath. So you want to get beyond the physical level. It's the same with our with meditation. Most of us are doing it from a physical brain level. We're running around in our thoughts and our brain, and we're not. It's the first gateway, as far as I can see at this point in time, is we need to break out of the materiality of the brain. So most of us are controlled. We're slaves to our brain, our physical brain. There's nothing wrong with the brain. The brain's a very powerful tool, but we're supposed to use it, not be used by it. And most of us are used by the physical brain. Most of us are, we've let our physical brain think what it wants for our entire lives. So it could be 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. We've allowed it to think whatever it wants with no control, no input from us, or very little control, at least anyway. So that's really the first task, is to really realize that, and realize that, hey, I've got no control over what thoughts I'm thinking at any one time. There could be a negative thought that comes into my mind and it consumes me, and I don't have any control of it, rather than me locking the door on it and not allowing it to enter my consciousness. So our thoughts and emotions build like a shell around our energy field, so to speak, and they don't allow us to connect to who we truly are and our birthright of who we truly are. So it's really the first task, is to really analyze the self, like in the Bible, they say, know thyself. In Buddhism, they say mindfulness. It's all the same thing. You need to really flip the switch and realize that, hey, I've got not much control over what I'm thinking or what I'm feeling, for that matter. how do I get that control back? How do I not be a slave to myself or to my materiality, and become a master of this thing, this vessel that I'm in? I want to be the person in the driver's seat, not the person in the back seat. So that's the kind of the first phase. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Thank you for sharing. Even just you speaking into that, it's really supported my own practice, and giving me little cues where I'm like, oh, I just need to tweak it there and there. So thank you. And you couldn't have said it so like on point around the physicality of breath work at the moment. And I've been contemplating almost like, is this been planted, this trending breath work, like the really sort of intense breath work to actually take away from the power and the sacredness of the breath, almost like a little trend to distract people. And I was using Wim Hof this stuff for a while. It really helped me in the gym, like benching pretty heavy and deadlifting and whatnot. But it wasn't until I started to do a rebirthing style breath work, which is very slow, and it just changed everything. I was like, whoa, some different power here. And then not long after, that's when I found and just like kind of talking into like most people are, slaves to their thoughts and emotions. And that's the first step to moving beyond it, is to start to analyze, start to break down and deconstruct, the programs, the patterns, the assumptions and beliefs of why we're doing dumb shit, really. I want to, like, I've always wondered this and sat with this, is in Hermeticism, how does soul fit in the Hermetic sort of framework? Because you don't hear soul. I don't think you hear much about soul in Buddhism, do you?
You do. It's just in a different language. So you got to be careful.
Yeah.
You've got to be careful with language, because when some people talk about soul, they're really talking about the spirit. And from a Hermetic point of view, we have a physical body, we have a soul, and we have a spirit. So we break it down and go, okay, well, what are those three things, and how do we break that down? The physical body lives on a timeline of the present moment. So it wants to eat, it wants to sleep, it wants to drink. It's constantly concerned with the present moment. It needs to breathe. It's constantly in this present moment, the physical body. From a soul perspective, it's concerned from the moment we enter our mother's womb to the time of our death. So that's its timing parameters. So it's a longer span time. It's concerned with this lifetime. And it's our character of, what we've built up in this lifetime. Who we think I think I'm David. You think you're James. It's this character that we've built up. Our spirit is the immortal part of us that's concerned with multiple lifetimes. So it's got more of an overview aspect to it. So it's a single lifetime is not of huge significance as such. So that's from the Hermetic point of view. That's how you break it down on a timeline scale. From a physics point of view, the physical body has a center of gravity in the dantian, which is about 4 fingers below the belly button and just in front of the spine. So that's a center of gravity. Everything in creation has a center of gravity. So that's the center of gravity of the physical body for most people. For the soul, it's generally between the solar plexus and the heart, depending on the person. So it's a center of gravity of the soul. So that's where you center the mind and you tap into that aspect. For the spirit, it's the center of the head. So that's a center of gravity of the central point, the depth point of those 3 states of reality, I guess. To break that down further, you go, okay, well, what are the parameters of those things? The physical world is subject to time and space. So it's got a time and space aspect to it. The soul, or the astral world, is subject to space but not time. And then the spirit is timeless and spaceless. So it's got a different aspect to it. So that's where you can kind of recognize when you're in your practice and you go, okay, well, how much time is present? And it's not something that you have to guess when you get there. It's like, oh, I'm time slipping away. I don't know how long I've been here. And you start to slip away into this timeless feeling. And then space starts to dissolve and you go into a more mental state. That's really the progression up of working up the vibrational scale and learning to separate the three bodies and really getting a feel for each one and understanding, okay, where am I at? How do I tap into what are the physics behind what I'm doing? And that's really what Hermetics is. Hermetics is it's a science. You don't have to be, you can be a Buddhist and be practicing Hermeticism. You can be a Christian, you can be a Taoist, you can be a Hindu. It doesn't really matter. All Hermetics does is it gives you the kind of the physics outline of why these things work. Why does that system work? And you can break it down and go, okay, this is why it works. Instead of just believing it out of blind faith, you want to understand, okay, why does this work? Why does me following this system work? What parts of that system works? And how does it work from a scientific or physics point of view? And that's really what Hermetics is.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I'd never come across, so I'd come across the word Hermeticism and Hermetics just through like Flower of Life teaching, both and whatnot, but never really dove into it. And it was just like, I'm not a science guy. I've never been a person who enjoyed school or science. But coming across this, it was like the first thing, in a quite a different kind of language, I actually understood things and actually put things in place. And I was like, holy shit. For me, what drew most, well, I guess the wisdom teachings was Buddhism. That was like the first sort of books I read in prison. It's the first time I started reading. I was 25. It was actually Buddhist texts in there, somehow finding those, or they landed in my lap. And it's still like it's very hard to decipher and very hard to like make sense of. And then coming into Mark's work and breaking it down, and even just sharing the parameters, I've meditated and had that spacelessness and timelessness. And I didn't know I didn't know what it meant. Like, it was an experience. I was like, whoa, what the hell happened? And it wasn't until like you reading his work and even hearing you speak, it's kind of like, oh shit, okay. So I was moving up the vibrational scale. But it's going to be very easy to be stuck in the physicality, with eat, shit, sleep, drink. And I guess it's like, how do we rest? Is the idea to bring the spirit, the soul, and the physical into like a oneness or into sync? Or is it to rest our center in one place, one spot? Or do we use, I guess, because I guess I resonate with the Dantians. It's like it feels the most resonant, the three sort of places. Do we rest it? What was I trying to say? Rest it in one place and be from there.
From my perspective, the goal is to embody our highest level of attunement or embody the spirit. So we want most of us are living through the physical body, and where the physical body is in control. So our physical brain is in control, our urges, our desires, all those things are in complete control of our daily life. So it's like our physical body is in the driver's seat and our spirit's in the back seat. We kind of want to flip that, where our spirit's in the driver's seat and our physical body is in the back seat. And that's really the goal. And if we assume for a moment that reincarnation is real, we've all had countless lifetimes. In one of those lifetimes, you may have had a very high connection with divinity or the infinite consciousness or whatever you want to call it, God, whatever. That means that there's a part of that still within you. There's a part of you that recognizes that part of you. So we want to embody that highest level of attunement, our highest level that we've ever achieved in any life cycle, and allow that to be the driver of our existence in this world. And that means truly embodying it. And when you are embodying something or not. It's It's not something you have to guess. It's an experience, and you know when you're there. It's an overwhelming experience. You might call it the higher self, or there's a million different terms for it. But it's embodying that our highest level to become the best versions of who we are. And there's part of us, we already have that within all of us. It's the static of our thoughts and our emotions that block us from seeing it and block that power from coming through. And when I say power, it's not coming so much from a personality perspective. It's a universal perspective. You become more concerned with the external rather than the internal. So you become more concerned about the person in the street, and because they're a reflection of you, they're part of you, your consciousness starts to expand, and it's like that old saying, you become one with the universe. You literally do. You become, your energy field expands and expands, and you become more of your environment. So your mental body becomes very, very large, and your environment becomes an extension of you. Now, to get this understanding, I think, and one of the greatest teachings I had from my teacher was to understand energy. Because most people that try and get to this point through the mind will get lost. It's very difficult because it's very subtle, and it's quite a journey to get there only through the mind. It's much easier from my perspective to first learn how to feel energy, understand what energy is, and then it becomes obvious. Once you start to learn how to hold the mind external of the physical body, everything becomes obvious. You become it's your spiritual senses or your higher senses, or whatever you want to call them, naturally begin to awaken. And it's the first gateway. And that's because in human consciousness, the feeling gate, the gate of the feeling, is still open to some degree. It's still okay to say to someone, I have this feeling about this person, or I have this feeling about this place, and you don't get looked at like a crazy person. Whereas if you say, I can see spirits, or I can see this energy around this tree, people, oh, you're crazy. Or it's even worse, if you can say, I can hear this person talking to me, or I can hear this spirit talking to me, you're locked away in the funny farm. So human consciousness has kind of shut the doors on the vision gate and the hearing gate. So the feeling gate is still open to some degree, and that's why it's the easiest one to open for most people, and it's the most advantageous in this particular world system. It's the quickest way in. So to get there through the feeling gate, and then once you get the feeling, then the visual gate and the audio gates become a little bit more understandable and a bit more obvious, and you have a bit more control over them. And all of these things really ultimately take balance. You need to be, in Hermetics, they talk a lot about equilibrium. So everything is based on the four elements: fire, air, water, and earth. And we're not talking about the physical aspects of those qualities. It's more the elemental aspects. So everything in creation, if you look at majority of spiritual systems throughout creation have references to fire, air, water, and earth. It's in Buddhism, it's in Hinduism, it's in most of the major religions. Not that I think Buddhism is a religion, it's a science, the same as Hermetics. Buddhism is the most in-depth science there is on the planet, really. It has so much depth to it, but it really, people only understand it on a surface level. But if you really study Buddhism, it's a science. It's a very safe path to get to wherever you want to go. Depends on where you want to go, obviously. But if we're going back to the four elements, for instance, if we look at an energy molecule, it has an electric charge, it has a magnetic charge, it has a neutral between the electric and magnetic, and the combination of the three aspects creates electromagnetism. So if we break that down logically, the electric aspect is fire element, the magnetic aspect, water element, the dividing principle between the electric and the magnetic is the air element, and the combination of the three, fire, air, water, and earth, or electric, magnetic, neutral, creates electromagnetism, the earth element. So it's everything in creation can be broken down into those elemental aspects. It's a master key to break everything down and see how everything works. So yeah, was that answering?
And that was a really good short summary of my question. I want to read it back because, like, for me, my whole life, and I didn't know what it was, so I was just speaking to it because it made me laugh. But so I've been like a highly feeling, sensory sort of child, always have been, and throughout my whole life, I could hear voices and hear things. I didn't know I was hearing spirits, no idea. And when my life got quite dark, I was hearing demonic voices, very dark voices telling me to do very not nice things. I didn't act on it, but I also didn't tell anyone because it was pretty wild. I would have got locked up, like you said. Um, and it's not until I started to help heal all these parts of myself, and the big thing that helped shift this and control this was coming off plant medicine. Not that I was using a lot of it for medicine, only psilocybin, but I was addicted to marijuana. Been clean off that now for almost 3 years, and it's just helps everything become so much cleaner, more pure, more in control, especially around the different sense gates. And one of my teachers, who she was very, she's a psychotherapist, but also very deep in Eastern philosophy and Buddhism, and she taught, I guess she helped me return back to the easiest sense gate to open, which is the feelings, or they call it clairsentience, I believe. And I feel like for most people in today's age, this is probably the easiest way to begin to start to heal and to transform, is to come into the body and into that sort of sensory experience of, how are we feeling, being with that sense gate. And we live in a bit of a sensory world, so it can be quite overwhelming. Could you, I know we went, I want to go into the elements as well, because I've obviously read and studied a bit about that, and I found that incredibly fascinating. And how, like, started to read Franz Barden's book, I downloaded it, The Elemental, but he breaks it down. I was just like, it blew my mind open. I was just like, wow, I didn't realize there's so much to it. And I think even Rudolf Steiner goes into breaking it down as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll bring it back. But for some of the beginners that would be listening to this, around tuning into the feeling sense gate, would that be interlinked into what we're talking about around the vital breathing being a beginning step?
Yeah, it is. It comes with a bit of a word of warning, though. And this is something that's overlooked quite a lot in meditation circles and those kinds of things. And this was something that was very probably more strongly projected by my teacher's teacher than my teacher himself. But although it was still projected very strongly by both, to be honest. It comes down to working on ourselves. It's if you start to do this energy work and you start to connect to energy, or you start to get into meditation, you're naturally going to tap into higher sources of energy. And when you're running those through the body, and even if you're unaware of it, whatever you've got, whatever programs you've got running through you, whatever negativity we've got inside of us, whatever habits we've got inside of us, is going to get stronger. So really, the most important aspect out of the whole path, in my opinion, at this stage, is perfecting the character. You have to analyze yourself. So if you look at where you go into Buddhism for a moment, they have something called the 7 stages of awakening. So the first stage is mindfulness. So you become very mindful of who you are. The second stage is analysis of qualities. So you analyze yourself, you analyze how you think, how you feel, and how you act on a daily basis and throughout your whole life. And then the third phase is persistence. And these are, in my perspective, these aren't really sequential. They work together. So the mindfulness, the analysis of qualities, and the persistence is like the first sphere that you have to go through. And it's really, you look at the Bible, they say, know thyself. It's the same thing. So when you really do this genuinely and you work through your stuff, basically, a lot of people call it shadow work or whatever you want to call it, but you need some sort of system to go, okay, well, how do I actually do this? And in Hermetics, you get a journal and you're very consciously aware of how you're thinking, how you're feeling, how you're acting on a daily basis. And you scan back through your life until your birth, and you look at all the ways that you've reacted through your life. And this doesn't need to be a negative connotation behind it, because a lot of the times those actions that you were taking may not even be your own. We are all more sensitive than we realize. Us having a conversation right now, you're in Sydney, I think, or somewhere in the northern beaches. I'm in Brisbane in Queensland. We're interacting mentally, and because the mental plane is not subject to space, we have instant connection mentally. So we're exchanging thoughts mentally, even though we're talking physically. There's a part of us that's exchanging and interchanging mentally. And we do this with everyone on a daily basis. And it's not a conscious thing. It's something that we just naturally happens. You walk into a supermarket, it's 1,000 people in the supermarket. They've all got these mental fields that you're working through. And if you're not conscious and not aware of who you truly are, and you're not focused, you can pick up some of that energy and take it on as your own. And you act out those feelings as though they're your own. And maybe they're not yours. So that's why it's really important to know who you are. So when you do recognize a negative thought form come in, or a negative feeling, or a negative action, you can be conscious about it and go, that's not mine. I need to clear that energy out of my field and clear my energy. That's something to be really probably highly emphasized, as that's really the most important thing. And so we go back to the Buddhist concept, mindfulness, analysis of qualities, and persistence. When you work through that sincerely for a certain amount of time, it's different for everybody. There's a point of critical mass. And I personally believe that there's a lot of different stages of this. We have little gateways, little mini enlightenments that we go through along the way. But when you work on this for a specific amount of time, or not specific, but enough time where the critical mass reaches a point where it breaks and you change. In Buddhism, it's the fourth phase of the 7 stages of awakening, which is called the rapture phase. So something happens. It's a physical experience. It's not something you have to guess about. It happens, and you're no longer the person that you once thought you were. You remember who you truly are, and you go, wow, how did I forget who I truly am? How did I forget? It's like you wake up from a dream and you're like, oh, I've been living in the dream for the last 20 years. This is who I really am. And it's a definitive experience. Not something that you have to guess. It happens, and it's overwhelming. So from there, the rapture phase, you move into serenity, because you remember who you truly are, and you become serene because you've got there's no more trying to figure out who you are. You remember, so you become serene, you become a lot more relaxed, and you move into the serenity state. From there, you move into deep concentration, because you're serene and you're at peace and the static in your energy field has balanced out, and you've become, from a Hermetic point of view, you come into equilibrium or elemental equilibrium. So there's a balance between the fire, air, water, and earth elements within the body, within the physical body, within the soul, and within the spirit. You become completely balanced, and you can concentrate properly for the first time, truly concentrate, where you can stay one-pointed in focus on something and not break. And that's the concentration phase. From there, the final phase is equanimity. So complete equanimity. So if we look at the Buddha, for instance, he went up through the levels and then came back down and stepped out into Nibbana through equanimity. So that was his gateway into Nibbana. What Nibbana is, who knows? But that's even the Buddha said, don't try and contemplate Nibbana, because your head will explode. So it's a lot of this stuff comes back to, and I know I'm going off your topic here, but
That's all right.
I'll come back to that. One thing that was really jumped into me about my teacher was focus on the process and not the result. So forget about where you're trying to get to. It's good to have a goal and to know what your goal is, because not everybody's goal is the same. Not everybody wants to attain full awakening in this life cycle. People are just happy to live their life and do what they do. Some people want to go all the way. So you got to kind of define what that is in the beginning. Without a destination, we kind of end up getting lost. So you need to define, okay, this is what I really want. This is where I'm going. This is where I'm heading. But once you've declared that on a deep level, then you forget about it and focus on the process of how do I get there? And forget about the results. Results will come in their own time, and just focus on the process. So we go back to the Buddhist concept, you're mindful, analyze your qualities and persist to amend those qualities so you can purify your character. That's the most important aspect. All the fun and energy stuff is great, but without doing that, it'll end up doing more damage than good, because you'll connect with this energy and you'll have a lot of energy going on in your body, but your character, your makeup of who you are, if you haven't done the work, that's why you see so many spiritual teachers that are off with the fairies, or they're doing something really negative in the background, because the energy has to get out somewhere. So it takes the path of least resistance and it breaks out through their negative habits. So it's a system of, okay, you kind of got to, that's some really important thing to work on yourself. If you look at it from the Buddhist perspective, again, there's 4 factors to this. They call it the 4 right exertions. So it's inviting positive qualities to arise. So you have an energy of inviting positive qualities to arise within you. You release negative qualities that have arisen. So you release those negative qualities within you, and you don't allow them to have any input into your life anymore. The third step is they're not steps, they're all at once, is to nurture the positive qualities that have arisen within us. So nurture those positive qualities that have arisen within us, and then prevent negative qualities from arising. So you have a protection up where you don't allow those negative qualities to arise anymore. So inviting positive qualities to arise, releasing negative qualities that have arisen, nurturing positive qualities that have arisen, and preventing negative qualities from arising. So it's really the 4 right efforts. They call it the 4 right exertions. How do you apply effort to be mindful, analyze qualities, and persist? And from a Hermetic perspective, it's a little bit different, but really the same thing, just in different language. So the way we fight negative qualities is there's 3 ways from a Hermetic perspective. We have auto-suggestion, which is where you implant commands into the subconscious mind to really change your negative habits. So if you're trying to quit smoking, you go to sleep with a set of beads and I'm a non-smoker, I am a non-smoker, I am a non-smoker. And it has to be a command and in the present tense as though it's already happened. And you implant that mantra, that command into the subconscious mind as you're falling asleep. And then as soon as you wake up as well. So you transform your negative qualities. The second phase is, or the second option is to just do through pure willpower. So when you want to pick up a cigarette, you bring up the willpower and you just don't allow it to arise within you. And you don't allow that habit to arise. The third quality is to use alchemy, where you tune into the elemental quality behind that feeling of wanting to pick up a cigarette, and you transform it to its higher aspect. So say if it's, someone cuts you off in traffic and you feel this fire of anger arise, you transform that fire of anger into the fire of willpower, and you become more willpower through that. So you transform, it has to be in its same elemental quality. You can't transform love to hate. It has to be in the same quality to make it work.
Yeah.
Is that all making sense?
Yeah, it is for me.
So yeah, getting back to the energy thing, that was a long-winded way of a word of warning, basically.
No, I'm glad you shared that word of warning. Definitely something my teacher helped me understand was not to rush the path, and not to, I was quite focused on the outcome and the result, and she helped bring me back to just be with the process, be with what's in front of me while still holding that higher vision or that higher goal.
Yeah.
I'm interested to know, so when you say prevent negative, is in the prevention of the negative arising of, I guess, negativity or negative characteristics, at the same time as we're preventing it, is there still like a sort of loving embrace that it's there at the same time? Like it's like almost like a tough love or firm boundary of like, no, or is it just like preventing?
The love aspect is important. However, it's only one part of divinity. It's an important thing to embody, and the love for your fellow humans and fellow mans and fellow beings around you. It is an important aspect. But the willpower aspect is also a hugely important. So if we look at it from an elemental perspective on creation, the divine willpower, universal love, wisdom or universal knowledge is the air element, and then universal consciousness or consciousness itself is the earth element. So it's the love aspect is one aspect of divinity, and it's very important. I personally, love is a very powerful energy, but when it comes to battling negative character traits, you kind of not, you also don't want to be too soft on yourself at the same time. It's
Awesome.
be tenacious with yourself and ruthless with yourself, and be kind and lenient to your fellow man. So, if you look at, if we're looking at, you're judging someone, or you're judging their behavior, you want to flip that to, if you're really conscious and you're really feeling compassion for that person, and you look back through their life, they may be acting in a terrible way, but they may have had a really bad childhood, and that's why they're acting that way, because the energies are still running through them, and it's not really them, it's the vibrations that are running through them that are making them act that way, and they just haven't got enough consciousness to be aware of it. Or so you feel, that's how you can feel compassion for your fellow person. And there's some good little mental tricks that you can use for this. If we say, for instance, that you're having a trouble with judgment, judging other people. We flick through Instagram and you have an instant feeling of, oh, I don't really like that person, or I've got envy for that person, or there's jealousy or hatred or whatever those feelings are. You can really flip that by, that's where I was going there for a second. Lost. So just changing those states of awareness to feel, more love and not have any, try and get through those judgments and change those aspects. Because we're having these, when you say prevent negative qualities from arising and nurturing positive qualities that have arisen, this is happening on all three levels. So it has to happen mentally, emotionally, and physically. So we could be pretending on the physical level that we're not judgmental, or we're not physically judging that person, but in our mind we've got this judgment coming through, or in our feeling we've got this judgment coming through, but in our physicality we're not expressing that, but it's still happening because it's happening on a mental level or emotional level. So it's a matter of being really aware of these different levels of our consciousness. And this is something that you can really, everybody knows that we have thoughts and we have thinking, we have feelings, and we have physical actions. And that's how we present ourselves in all three worlds. So it's a matter of being really conscious of those three worlds. So when you're doing the mindfulness analysis of qualities and persistence, it's not just in the physicality of life, it's on the mental level, and it's on the emotional level, and it's on the physical level as well. And you have to be correct on all three levels, because the idea is to bring everything back into equilibrium, so then you become connected.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I definitely can share that I have and have trouble with the judgment piece. It's definitely inherent in
It's a difficult one.
the collective. Where else I go with that? Yeah. So once we clear, say for instance, we clear the character of negative characteristics or negativity, is what's left is like the soul qualities, or we hear a lot about soul purpose or your purpose. What's your perception of that? Because it's definitely something that I've been contemplating, sitting with, investigating, is what is purpose? What is our purpose? Because we can have purposeful action, meaningful action, fulfilling action. But then we hear things like soul purpose, and it's interesting to hear about, after you spoke about that, breaking down the character. Yeah.
I think until we reach full awakening or full enlightenment, which I believe is a real thing, it's not something that's unattainable. Enlightenment is a real thing, and I think there's a lot of different. You have a lot of these little mini enlightenments up until full enlightenment, but until you reach that full awakening, there's always work to do. As in working on the character, there's still flaws, because it's only our flaws in our character that stop us from being truly connected. It's the static within our energy field, our thoughts and emotions, that stop us from connecting and attaining full awakening or full soul awakening, or whatever you want to call it. So in respect to that, it's just a matter of, the work's never really done. Basically, you got to keep on track and keep working through our stuff until we get to there. In regards to purpose, I think if you have to think about it, then most of the time it's not really your true purpose. Your true purpose presents itself when you're truly connected. It becomes obvious. It becomes a natural state, from my perspective anyway. That might not be true for everyone, but most of the time where we're thinking about what our purpose is, it's coming from our material brain. It's not coming from a deep place of connection and understanding, and when you are connected to that higher part of yourself, it becomes obvious. You don't have to guess. It's just there. It's, oh, yeah, I understand. It's, you remember, you know. And in regards to purpose, it's an interesting one. You know, who knows what your purpose is? It's I think it's something that I try not to put too much attention onto it myself. I know I love to teach, and that's mine. I love this stuff just because I'm thinking about it 24 hours a day and it never leaves. So it's like, well, I may as well share it. But it's also not for everyone because it's, it's quite in depth and so yeah.
What you're teaching is for those that are really putting 2 feet in. That's what I sense. Your
it is. Yeah, there's no point to sort of start down this track, specifically this work, unless you're kind of all in. And I've found that there's not too many people that really want to jump all in because it's, self-included at times. It's been although I'm always there, there's been times in my life where I haven't wanted to be there, even though it's niggling at me in the background constantly. So, yeah, it's not for everyone, not for everyone that wants to, and if you just want to get some relaxation and, then this kind of work is probably not for you. It's better just to go and do some relaxation meditation or whatever you want to do. It's not really I think a good way to find that out is to go and sit in a temple for a month and see how you feel and go, okay, am I ready to let all this stuff go? Because it really cuts off all your comforts. You don't get a bed, you get a sheet and you sleep on the floor, and you kind of got to be left to your own devices, and it's pretty crumbling as well. I landed in the temple about 85 kilos and I came back 60 kilos.
Were you 60 kilos?
Yeah, I
I can't even.
Lost 25 kilos eating 1 meal a day, and it was pretty intense. It wasn't. It's not easy. It's and for people to say, when people say a monk's life is easy, it's
no way.
Not easy. It's one of the hardest things you can ever do. Really, it's a challenge. But I can see the benefits of it. With Buddhism, I think specifically especially in the Thai tradition, in Thailand, they have 2 different traditions. You have the city monks who are more intellectuals, and then you have the forest monks who are the serious practices, and they really practice intensely. So it's a matter of, with Buddhism, they cut off the physical, they cut off the emotional, and they just focus on the mental. And it's a very quick, you can see the benefits of it. It's a very quick way to start moving up, because you haven't got any emotional stuff going on around you. You haven't got any physical stuff going on around you. You don't have to worry about food. You just focus on practice. And it's an interesting journey.
Oh, very interesting. I love how you said that constant little niggle. I've had that because I feel like I had a couple of mini enlightenment, spontaneous experiences in prison, without my knowing. It was, now it's kind of like, fuck, is that probably what it was? And I've been sitting with that going, shit. Because since these experiences, there's been that niggle. It's just like, don't stop, just keep going. And even though part of me is like, I don't want to, it's just that niggle's there. And I think not everyone has that. And I like what you said about purpose. I kind of have landed that same sort of answer. It's like, your purpose is something it's innate, it's natural, it's organic, it's just there. And it won't feel forceful, I guess is the word.
If the spirit is in the driver's seat, the purpose comes out naturally.
Yeah,
the purpose comes from the spirit. It doesn't come from our emotional selves or our physical selves. It comes from the spirit, part of our spirit that is working on this life cycle. If it's in the driver's seat, then the purpose becomes natural. So I think the best thing people can do is try and really operate from that level, and you raise your consciousness up into that connection, and you operate from that level. Because when you're truly connected with that part of yourself, you speak differently, you communicate differently, you become someone different. You're no longer David or James. You're the purest part of who you are, and you become somebody different. And it's kind of hard to communicate at that level, because it's a different state of awareness. It's hard to communicate like this from that level most of the time, until you can really embody it and become it, and it becomes it has a critical mass of input where it's got the most percentage of, we touch these moments throughout our day, everybody does, where you do connect to that part of yourself, but it's very fleeting. So it's a matter of building that up. So we're operating out of that level and that part of ourselves more and more and more percentage of the day, until the point where you're operating out of that most of the time. And you'll find when you do touch that part of yourself, you walk differently, you talk differently, you eat differently. It's a very different experience.
Oh, definitely. Just from being on that journey of touching it a little bit more. How I was 8 years ago, 9 years ago. Yeah, I'm a completely different person. I'm talking differently. There's one thing that I struggle with still, is swearing. Definitely something I'm trying to work through. But I want to, just before we finish, I guess touch in on. Sorry, this thing's just going on. There we go. How do you find navigating these sorts of practices as a father and a parent? As I know you hold a similar perception for me, as they are little teachers, and they're far more connected to source or spirit than, I guess, what we are, but then it's not as conscious, or like, I don't even know the word. Anyway, I think you know what my question is.
Yeah, I understand. I'm pretty lucky. My girls are really very easy, very tuned in, and yeah, they are little teachers, and they're probably a lot more advanced than I am. It's just a matter of sticking. I think really what it comes down to is sticking to your practices that you're doing, and you do them consciously, and you do them every day. And it's like anything in life. If you really want something, you've got to practice it. You've got to embody it. You've got to do it. You've got to become it. You can't just, it's no good just knowing the knowledge and trying to partake that on to everybody else's, which is what seems to be happening in the spiritual community or social media world, is where most of us are just regurgitating information without having any experience of what it actually is. And that's not to have a dig at anyone. It's just it's just really what's happening out there. And from what I can tell, to some degree, I'm not saying I'm some guru or anything, but yeah, you really have to embody the teachings. And really, if you look at Jesus Christ, for instance, not to say that I'm a Christian or anything, but it wasn't his teachings that were important. It was his deeds. How did he think? How did he feel? And how did he act in every moment? He was embodying that part of himself. He was connected to something higher than himself. And there's some processes to awaken those things, or qualities is probably a better word for it. Again, this comes back to the elements. We have humility. So it's the deep humility of how much humility can you embody within yourself? Which is the earth element. How much devotion can you embody within yourself? Water element. Or in devotion, how much devotion have you got to your spiritual path? true devotion. How truly devoted are you to that thing? How much reverence, respect do you have for a higher power than yourself? How much reverence is within you? And then how much sacredness can you embody within yourself? And it comes back to, that's what I'm getting at, is these qualities allow you to really tap into that deeper part of yourself. And when it comes to, having a family and those kind of things, if you look at Buddhism, even the Buddha said someone who attains enlightenment as a monk is not as highly attained as someone who attains enlightenment as a normal person, because there's so much more to deal with. We have responsibilities, we have mortgages to pay, we have little mouths to feed. I struggle with this as well. It's just, all I want to do is teach and be around this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But I get forced out of it because I have to provide. I have to, so I have to operate in the normal world and still try and embody these principles and take them with me as I'm sitting around a meeting with property developers or whatever I'm doing, and sitting in a meeting around a bunch of people, multi-millionaires, and thinking about spiritual concepts in the background. It's a challenge, but that's the good part of it, because that's when you really know you're there. If you go back to Christianity for a moment, ye must be able to walk through the valley of death and still hold your embodiment. So walk through a hell realm, but still be connected, still have that deep belief, that deep divinity within you, and hold that energy and hold that embodiment. So I think that's the way I look at it. Yes, it's a challenge. Yes, it's not as easy as living in the forest and taking yourself out, but it comes back to that old analogy of the wizard or the guru who goes into the mountains and thinks they've attained enlightenment, and they come back into the world and someone gets angry with them and then they lose their temper and they'll toddle off back to the mountain again. Haven't really got there because you haven't tested yourself. It hasn't been tested by the circumstances that really, you look at someone like, again, go back to Jesus Christ for a moment, presuming he was a real man and whatever happened then. But we go back to that story, it's, he's getting pelted with rocks, but still feeling compassion for those people. He's going through the most torturous experience, but still feeling love and still embodying that compassion and forgive them for they know not what they do. He had a deep forgiveness, even though they were torturing him, he still forgave them and had this deep sense of compassion for them. And that's really how we can operate in the physical world, and how the crazy world that we live in at the moment, and operate at that level. So step out of the more physical ideas of how we want our life to be, and operate as embodying and becoming that highest part of yourself. And then whatever happens, and you work with whatever you've got, I guess. Did I answer your question very well?
Yeah, you answered it beautifully. I'm going to leave it there, but I want to just summarize what you just said, because I think that is we can go off into the mountains and be the guru, the wizard, and Ram Dass says it perfectly. Went off into India, came high, very high, came back to Christmas dinner, and his dad asked him, "Richard, did you get a job yet?" And he just flipped his shit. So you said it beautifully. It's like you can go off into the mountains and become enlightened, but until we learn how to be with the pressures of life or the mundane, we won't truly start to begin to transform. And like what you said is holding those higher values and virtues and qualities and bringing them into your day, treating people, humility, reverence, and devotion.
Yeah.
But you answered it Yeah, very beautifully. So I want to finish it there. We've been going for about an hour and 20 now, so don't want to extend it too much further. Thank you for coming on the podcast. I appreciate your time and appreciate all that you've shared. I know you love teaching, so I know for you, I can see the satisfaction in your being, which is beautiful. If you want to share where people can find you and maybe some of your offerings, just give you a moment now to do that.
Yeah, they can check me out on the Instagram page, the Art of Attunement. Or websites on there as well, www.theartofattunement.com.au. And that's about it. I can teach online, in person. Got a little studio in Brisbane where I practice from. It's my little temple. And yeah, that's about it. So I teach meditation, qigong, also do personal training, but yeah, whatever I can do. Happy to chat.
So thank you so much, David. Again, appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Pleasure. Thanks, mate.